Welcome to the Modern CPA Success Show, where we're 100% focused on helping accounting firms achieve success. If you're an accounting firm owner who wants to learn how to grow your firm by providing virtual CFO services, then this podcast is for you.
All right, welcome to today's podcast. Really excited about today's show because we're going to talk about one of our core values, and I think a lot of companies, whether it's a core value or something that they just talk about internally, really care about, and that's hiring and having curiosity within your company, as well as constant learners. And so, joined once again by Adam.
Hey, everybody.
He's our co-founder and owner of the company, and then also joined by Josh, who's our head of People Ops.
Hey everybody, glad to be here.
So this, again, this is a really important topic to us, and wanted to bring Josh in here because Josh is, really important part of making sure that we have this as part of our core values. And so, Josh, I'm going to throw this right over to you. And so, when it comes to having curiosity and constant learners within your company, where do you start? What's the most important part?
Yeah, well, I think naturally we will start at the beginning. So in order to have curiosity as a central value for our company, we obviously want to hire for that. So as we're going through the process with our candidates, I'll just use our senior accountants, for example. They're going to start with an interview with me, and I kind of do that initial screen. I'm looking for a little deeper dive into their resume, a little bit of culture fit, but one of the big things I'm looking for is, have they done their homework on Summit? Do they know who we are and what we're about? And are they asking me questions? Really, I want to see, is this person trying to envision what life might be like as a part of this team? Are they curious about how people relate, or how do we operate in a fully remote environment, or how are clients assigned, and all those sorts of things? I'm looking for any of those questions to come up, because that's telling me, okay, this person from the get-go, they're wanting to acquire more knowledge and understanding. They're wanting to learn. And in each round of our interviews, the opportunity for that goes deeper and deeper, because if they get past me, they're going to do an interview with some of our senior accountant trainers. So that's somebody who's done the role for years. They've got the actual tactical experience of, I've been in the weeds, I've been doing this job. So they get the opportunity again to ask deeper questions of what is a day in your life like? What do you think would have made your first year easier? What's one thing you would have told, if you could rewind and tell first week you one thing, what would you have told them? All sorts of things. And those are all questions I've heard that are telling me, like, okay, this person is really, they're invested in this process. They want to know. And that's pretty starkly juxtaposed with somebody who we finish asking them questions and say, all right, now, we've reserved this 15 or 20 minutes to allow you to ask any questions you've got. And they just kind of give you a blank stare, and they're like,
So just to qualify, Josh, so you would say, what is my starting pay? What are my benefits? Or when can I take my first days of PTO? Not good curiosity questions for a first interview.
So I'll clarify that those are perfectly acceptable.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
I'm just
They are,
where you're going, man. We got it.
Yeah.
He's a people ops guy. He has
we
to
like to
answer this
say,
the right
like,
way.
clear is kind. So if somebody wants to know those things, I'll answer them. But that's not telling me anything about your character. That's telling me that you have an agenda next to you and you're taking some tactical notes. But that's not telling me that you're curious about what this job feels like day in and day out, and if you can see yourself doing it and growing into it, and how you could contribute to the company. So once somebody gets past their trainers, they're going to go to somebody who would be in leadership over them, and again, more and more opportunities to ask questions, to be curious. What's it like to work under you? What would be one way to manage up? All these sorts of things that we're looking for. So that's one way that we really fight to center curiosity, is that we want to filter out people who lack curiosity in our interview process.
I think what's funny about what you mentioned there is I'm usually kind of the end phase of that interview process. And so usually they've talked to you, they've talked to the trainers, and then I'm kind of the last stage. And so, like, when they're at that point, they've already had 2 opportunities to ask questions. And I'm kind of their third chance to ask questions. And so sometimes, people will come in and be like, Josh did a great job answering questions. The trainers did a great job answering questions. I have nothing for you. And to me, that's still like, okay, there's nothing we've talked about in this conversation that has made any questions for you. Because I do my interviews as very conversational and just two people talking and really trying to figure each other out. And so, you want to make sure that they're going to hear something that that they have a question on. And again, the other part that I've seen is we'll begin the interview and I'll spend 5 minutes talking about what their typical day looks like just because it came up in conversation. I'll be like, yeah, this is what a typical day looks like, and just talk through it. And then their first question is like, can you tell me what a typical day looks like at some of the CPA? And so like those are the people that are like, again, yeah, they have questions, but like you said, they're pre-staged questions that are just like something that they've read on a website that they should ask, And so it's like, and Adam and I talked about this the other day with our CFOs is like we have these meetings where we go through and we're just trying to learn about a company. And especially for the CFO, the interview is a great first taste of that. How are they going to be in a conversation where they're discovering something? Because they're discovering about Summit. And if they're coming to me with preloaded questions and that's all they ask me, as opposed to being like, hey, about 5 minutes into the interview, you talked about this. Can you expand on that? Or I have a follow-up questions on that. Like that's what we're looking for, is because that's what we want our CFOs to do, is not just to like come in with staged questions. They want to be curious about what the person is actually saying and listening to them.
Yeah, I mean, same thing happens with onboarding too. I mean, once they jump on board, it's always scary whenever you get somebody that's not asking a ton of questions. Because I know as many processes and systems we have in place, I always tell people either like I'm the best, explainer person in the world, or you're the smartest person I've ever met. And no offense, but neither one of those are probably true. So it's like it's one of those things where you're just always telling people like you really have to speak up and ask questions if things don't make sense. So I think to your point, Josh, also creating an environment, we kind of talk about this a lot, but, creating that environment from day one where they feel like it's okay to ask questions, right?
Yeah, I think what you're talking about too is how our core value of curiosity really bumps up against our core value of being candid as well. Because if somebody doesn't feel the opportunity to be candid, you can't truly be curious. Kind of like you were saying, Jamie, if you're just reading your questions off your like yellow legal pad, and you're not present in the conversation and allowing yourself to go where the conversation's going and ask questions that you may not be fully prepared for, and you can't anticipate what the answer is going to be. But in order to be direct, to be candid, to get to the point, and to make sure you're getting to understanding, those are going to interplay really well with each other. And I think if one of those is lacking, it's going to affect the other one as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that's kind of the key when you're choosing your core values, is to make sure that they work together, right? So I know we spend a lot of time choosing our core values and thinking through them. And I know a lot of times your core values reflect your owners. And like Adam is probably one of the most curious people I've ever met in my life. Like, you could have a conversation with him about anything and he just wants to know every detail about it and ask a ton of questions. And so I think that's a lot of what it comes to. So Adam, do you want to talk a little bit about that tone at the top and how that works when it comes to curiosity?
Yeah, again, I mean, just kind of speaking into being at the core value, we definitely want to inspire that in people. So us asking a lot of questions, hopefully, makes them feel like it's okay for them to ask questions. And if not, then again, that's when we lean into the candid core value and we just call it out and we're like, hey, you should, this is a give and take. I'm a big fan of the 5 whys. I know it's not the best solution for every problem, but I know you hit on earlier that whenever we're even talking with new clients, just like you would a new team member, I'm always just asking why multiple times. Hey, this didn't work. Why? Well, because of this. Well, why was that? Because of, you know what I mean? So you just kind of layer down. And by, taking that approach and just before I speak or diagnose what's going on and try to prescribe a solution, I'm always just usually asking why at least 3 or 4 times and trying to get to the root of it, so that I can fully understand the problem. And so, again, whether that's just explaining to them what they need to be able to do and really understand the purpose of what they're doing, or you're digging deep into a client interview and you're trying to understand their business and how to best help them, it kind of goes hand in hand just to kind of take that approach. And so by doing that right out of the gate with everybody in the team and myself and Jody and everybody else included, both you, Jamie, and Josh, that I think that just kind of people get it and they just naturally start to lean into it a little bit more.
And I think there's something to be said about watching someone do it as well. So I think, again, sometimes when you're younger and you're trying to get motivated to lift weights or what, you watch an episode of Rocky or a movie of Rocky, and you're like, yeah, I want to do that. And I think also sometimes like that modeling works here is like, again, I know when I was first starting at Summit, like seeing Adam interact with the client, I'm like, dang, that dude really is just genuinely curious, knows how to ask questions. And so I think we try to get our team members involved in those meetings where they see, someone who really is curious do it and ask questions, and the amount of information they get out of it, like, wow, that really does work. And I think it is a learned skill. And so, Josh, you want to talk a little bit about it being a learned skill and kind of how that would work for a newer employee that might have it, but they're not all the way there yet?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, nobody is born with like this perfect position of humility where they're curious and they always want to learn more. And I think something that can be really motivating to people is we have almost a direct correlation of success with people who ask a lot of questions versus people who don't ask a lot of questions. And kind of like Adam alluded to before, like either I'm perfectly explaining this or you are the smartest person to ever live. And neither of those things is the case. So we see a lot of success from people who are, in our virtual office environment in Sococo. They're just knocking on people's doors, popping into people's offices saying, hey, can I pick your brain on this? Can I ask you about this? I think from a perspective of learning it, something we do is, I do coaching with all of our senior accountants on a regular kind of cadence with them. And part of what I'm doing there is really challenging them and asking those whys. And, I may get a piece of feedback and I'll ask like, well, do you think you were fully clear with your expectations about that? Well, no, I don't think I was. Okay, why don't you think you were clear about your expectations there? Do you think there was another question you could have asked? Do you think there's somebody else who could have been involved? Or do you think there was another piece of information that you were missing or the other party was missing? Um, but part of leaning into curiosity, there's going to be lots of other pieces that go along with that. One of them is going to be humility to say like, hey, I'm just not going to know the answer. And I'm a person, and everybody that I work with are also people with limits and limits to their understanding and to their experience, and that's not wrong, and that's not a broken system. That's how this is designed, and we have a collaborative, curious environment so that we can lean on each other. But that is, especially depending on the environment that people are coming from, a lot of people are afraid to do that because they may have been in an environment where they were looked down upon for not understanding, or chastised for asking questions out of turn, or you didn't learn all of your onboarding things in your first 2 weeks. Are you dumb? Like, of course, we would
Have I
never
said
say
that before?
anything like that.
Oh, okay. No, yeah, we would never say
Um,
anything like that.
but but you hear horror stories, and people come from places where that's happened, and that kind of brings me to something I wanted to add to, Jamie, you talked about how core values really flow from leadership, and in our case, our founders and owners with Adam and Jody. But I think a huge part of inspiring curiosity in people starts with, pardon me, creating a secure environment for them to be curious, where they're not afraid that, they'll knock on the wrong door, or they'll step on a landmine by asking the wrong question, or they'll get reprimanded for kind of drawing outside of the lines. But they have the freedom to know, like, okay, I am secure. I'm encouraged to ask these questions. Um, but in order to get that sort of secure environment, it means that your leaders cannot be leading out of any sort of insecurity. Because when your leaders feel insecure, that's when they get a short fuse. And that's when they, chomp at people for asking questions, or chastise them, or push back too fast and don't have the grace to sit down and say, okay, this person's been here for 60 days. There's no way that they're going to know how to perfectly execute this rev rec. It totally makes sense that they're here asking me this question. And I've had a really busy day, but that doesn't mean I can't stop and help them, or like connect them to somebody that can help them. So I think it starts at the top with leaders who are humble enough to realize, like, okay, sometimes I'm going to need to put aside my priorities and help here, and who are secure enough not to have a short fuse when those sort of questions and pushback comes up.
Yeah, and I think it's important. I mean, whenever I'm having conversations with people, I always, I'm pretty explicit and call out the fact that I love questions and answering questions and doing those kind of things. I prefer that kind of back and forth. But what I do think is important about curiosity that I guess we didn't really talk about, but I want to make sure is clear from a consulting standpoint is a lot of times whenever you talk about like, hey, ask why or have questions or do that kind of stuff, Jamie was talking about, being to the point where you're just kind of asking questions and to ask questions. That's what you have to be really careful about. Sometimes I'm in calls where I'll prep Jamie for a call and say, hey, make sure you ask a bunch of questions, keep saying why. And there doesn't seem to be any purpose behind the question.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't seem to be leading anybody down there. So there is a little bit of an art to it. And I'm not saying that you rehearse it beforehand or
Right.
anything like that, because the whole point is their response is going to take you down a different rabbit hole every single time. It's choose your own adventure every time they say something if you're actively listening. So just making sure that there's a purpose behind your questions. And like you said, don't feel bad about, asking a silly question or anything. I talk to, and they see it in client calls all the time. I'm just like, why would you do that? Like, I genuinely mean, like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Explain it like I'm a 5-year-old. And then sometimes I'll say that, and then they kind of explain it. And I go, well, why this? Why that? And by the time I get done with my why questioning and I'm going through all that, the client a lot of times is like, oh, I see where you're going with this. Yeah, nope, probably not a good idea. And I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's where I was going with it, And sometimes I'll be like, well, here's where I was going with it, and this is the reason why I was asking you all those questions. But now that the way you laid it out makes a lot of sense to me, and I don't think that's going to be an issue. And people can tell I'm engaged in the conversation. I understand what they're doing, and I'm not just, it's just not me hammering them with a bunch of meaningless questions.
And I think that goes back to the actual true core value, right? The core value is not just to ask questions. The core value is to be curious, right? And I think if you're curious, it's because you do have a purpose behind the question, right? Like I'm not asking questions to fill airspace, right? I'm not just sitting here asking questions because I want to fill the airspace. I want to actually know what the answer is because there's something behind it, right? So like when someone says something, maybe they talking back about the onboarding call, maybe my first 3 questions I have written down, the answers they give me are perfect and they give me exactly what I need out of it. But when I ask that 4th question, they're just missing one piece, or there's something behind it that I need to know. Okay, back to Adam's thing. Why? Okay, why? The client says, okay, we want to grow. We want to grow to 100 million in 2 years. It's like, okay, great answer. You fulfilled the question, but there is a lot behind that. And the question is, okay, why do you want to do that? What's the purpose of it? What's the meaning behind it? Because that'll give you more understanding of who that owner is and who that client is and why it's important. So I do think that the natural curiosity, or like actually wanting to know the answer as opposed to just filling airspace, is really key in this.
Yeah, I think you're completely right, Jamie, that I was thinking as we went along that questions are the means, but they're not the end.
Right.
The end of curiosity is that understanding and its engagement. And if we get to that end, then we're going to increase our quality of interactions with, our internal stakeholders and with our teammates. We're going to increase the quality of the service we provide to our clients because we are fully engaged. We are better understanding who they are and what they want. And ultimately, in our role in a consultative space, we want to help them better understand who they are and what they want. And the hope is that our curiosity leads to both our understanding and theirs as well.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think this is definitely a huge thing here at Summit. It's something that's really important, and it's not just for CPA firms. Like I think this could go for any company. So Adam, you want to talk a little bit about again, we've talked a lot about how this could work for CPA firms. You want to talk about how this could work for other companies and why it would be important for other service providers or other companies out there, and why this would be really important to their core values if they so see it.
Well, I mean, I think that it kind of speaks for itself that everybody wants somebody that's actively engaged in whatever they're doing, and curiosity is, the key example of somebody being interested in what they're doing and being engaged. So it's all about engagement. That's really what curiosity is. It does take a little bit. It is a little bit of an art, and it takes some practice. And as Josh said, being okay with being vulnerable. So setting it up as one of your core values and making it part of your culture means that it's okay to learn and make mistakes and fail forward. And I think that's really important for any organization to get bigger and better and stronger. But trying to make it also a continuous part of who you are and what you're trying to do is important as well. So that's why it's not only just us constantly asking questions of one another and trying to get to the root of things. It's also helps you become better at actually explaining the task, because you already know, now that I've already met with you a bunch of times, Josh, and I know you're going to riddle me with 5 different why questions or whatever it is. I'm fully prepared coming in. I'm like, so here's my idea. This is what I'm thinking. This is the problem. This is what I did. This is what I tried. So you're trying to also coach people into being better problem solvers themselves, because now they're going to think out the problem, as opposed to just, coming to you with their shoulders around their ears going, I don't know, that kind of a thing. They know you're gonna pepper them with stuff. So again, it goes both ways. It not only um, makes you more engaged as a consultant, but it also like really ups the game of the team member or even the client to know and think out questions on their own.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying also alludes to the fact that that really increases the quality of the partnership between us and our client too, because if they've gotten to where they've learned to problem solve and kind of project manage themselves and come to that meeting prepared, and they don't need the 30 minutes of whys that we normally ask them because they knew it was coming, then that allows us to go to the next step of development, and we're doing more strategic thinking, high level thinking, forecasting. We get to talk about more creative projects or complex problem solving, because we're not having to spend all the time in the weeds saying, why'd you do this? Well, why? Well, why? Well, why? Because they've already done that work themselves, and that's just going to increase the quality of our relationship with them moving forward.
Yeah, I think I was at a conference recently, and we talked a lot about verticals, and we talked a lot about how you choose your vertical, and I think there's a correlation between curiosity and passion, right? So I think that when you're thinking about your company and what you're going to do and how you're going to do it and who you're going to serve, you want to make sure you're passionate about it. And you want to make sure that it's something you're really interested in, because if it's something you're really interested in, you're going to naturally ask these questions. You're going to naturally be curious, and I think that goes into the again, that first step of, okay, we're going to be, let's just say, an agency. We're going to be an agency, and we're going to focus on churches. Okay, you can't have people that don't go to church, never been to church, doing that, right? You have to make sure people are at least passionate about the subject in some means. And then I think the other part of it is passion is contagious. So I think when it comes to hiring, obviously we work with a lot of agencies, and we're not like, tell me how passionate you are about agencies. Like, that's not a question we ask in our interview process, because that would limit our pool. But I think when you hear us talk about it, when you hear the owners and the leadership talk about it, that it's something we're really interested in, and we're really curious about it, and something we really do enjoy thinking about and just spending a lot of time talking about. I think it wears off on people, like, oh yeah, that actually is a really cool business model, and that's something that I could spend some time doing. And so I think that the two are very closely correlated there.
Yeah. Whenever you start to see the passion rub off of an owner, that's whenever you see the business start to go kind of downhill. So, whenever we engage clients, we kind of sometimes, relight that candle for them, because we start asking them about it, and you can see them kind of get more excited. And as you start drawing and putting together a plan for them, then they're usually like, oh, wow, this is great. And, they start to get more into the game. So it helps them in that regard as well. But
are you interested in offering virtual CFO services at your firm or scaling your existing service offerings? The Virtual CFO Playbook, How to Land $60,000 a Year Clients and Provide a Killer Client Experience, is an online series of modules that will equip you with essential tools for creating and delivering scalable VCFO services. These approaches have helped Summit CPA grow from $500,000 to upwards of $5 million in revenue over the past decade. If you're ready to grow your firm, visit summitcpa.net/VCFO Playbook to enroll now.
Josh, any other topics we need to talk about in this area? Like, I think we've covered quite a bit, but I want to make sure we're not missing anything. So any other areas of conversation we need to have around curiosity, constant learners, that we might have missed in our natural conversation here?
I think the only thing I would add here at the end is that this is a really important value for folks to have when it comes to their own career trajectories, and for people to feel the freedom to be curious and ask, what could my role evolve into? How could I make this better? Or is there some other part of the team that I could shift to where I could have a greater contribution? Somebody who has that sort of outlook is going to be, they're much more workable from a leadership perspective, because they're displaying, like, I'm a team player, I really want to contribute here, as opposed to somebody who kind of just wants to stay in their lane and not really think about anything else. And there's some people who love what they do and they don't want to change, and that's awesome. And I want to see them be curious about how could I make this role easier for me, and how could I increase my contribution over time, but still stay in this role and really crush it, like do it as well as I possibly can. But I love to see other people who are curious about, hey, maybe there's a gap that I'm seeing here. What if we created a new position that was a hybrid between two things? Or what if there's a way I could serve this part of our team in a specific capacity that I feel passionate about? It's something that's really helpful for people's career trajectory, and I think it helps them get placed into a position that's more fulfilling for them if they act on that curiosity over time to see where's my best fit, where's my best contribution, and I think that's ultimately going to help their satisfaction at work too.
Yeah, I oftentimes, like college kids will always ask, why did you choose accounting and what should I go into? And even just dealing with it with my own kids, I was talking to them and I said, well, anybody that tells you you just have to, go do the thing that you love the most in the world, I said, between you and me, they're full of crap. I go, professional baseball, and sorry to anybody listening that's just like, oh, I really love accounting. I'm not saying that you hate, you should do stuff that you hate. I mean, you want to make sure that there's a certain amount of passion, but, the thing you love most, Jamie, I know you love basketball, but sorry, man, you're not making the NBA.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not going to be a career. So it's one of those things where I always just, advocate for finding something that you're innately good at, that just comes to you naturally and that you're curious about how to get better at. And so if you have those two pieces, then it'll serve you well in any profession. And then if you're my kid, I also add a third one on there, which is, also make sure that it actually pays you okay, and you can have a livable wage, because I don't plan on supporting you for the rest of your life. Just that last caveat. But yeah, that's really the kind of the thing there. And for constant learning, and too, it's you can tell if you're curious about something if you're always wanting to read more about it or look into it or watch stuff about it. And for us, that's how that's a kind of a tell for the people that are in our leadership group is, are they taking it upon themselves to read a book or learn about something, contribute that back into the knowledge base. And of course, whenever we see that, we know we've got somebody that's really curious and passionate about what they do.
And I think to that point too, it's also oftentimes you're reading something not related to that and you find a way to relate it back to what you do, right? Like I could be reading, I remember a couple of years ago, I read a book about the early Patriots when they were first winning Super Bowls, kind of about this team structure and the learning style there and kind of how they did stuff. And I'm like, oh, I could see how that would work at Summit. And I started like drawing lines of like, okay, we could do some things here to again, like, make people work in a certain way. And so I think that's the thing too, is like everything you read, everything you consume, you do sometimes just convert it back to things you're passionate about and really curious about. I'm like, oh yeah, I could see how that would relate. And so I think that's the other thing too, is not only searching for topics or searching for books or videos or articles that relate to what we're doing, but also like just drawing correlations that might not always be there too. So.
And to be clear, you weren't talking about cheating, like whenever you're reading about the Patriots, right? So you
went there.
Back
you went there.
I don't mind the Patriots. I'm just teasing you.
So that's what happens when you're a Bears
One
fan.
thing I
you
really
have to, like throw things across the
throw
bow all the
everybody
time.
else
Yeah.
under the bus. That's right.
One thing I really like about what you guys just got to there is, we've talked before about being in the great resignation right now, and so many people are reshuffling what they do and where they work and what they want. And Adam, I think you're really touching on, I've seen several times recently kind of in the people operations space, people talking about the difference between burnout and bored out. And I really like what you said, like pick something that you actually have competency in, and that's going to help you not burn out. Because if you're always doing something that you're not naturally gifted in, that's really, really hard. And then to pick something that you're curious about and you have a passion in, that's going to help you prevent you from being bored out and just choosing something different because you're just so sick of doing the same thing over and over again. But I really think both of those things contribute to long-term satisfaction and wanting to invest where you are, to stay where you are, to grow a team, and then to grow relationships with your team. And that, again, contributes to the quality of service you provide, your personal quality of life while you're working there, all that good stuff.
Great. Well, I think this was a really good conversation, and we're right up against the clock here. I wish we could keep talking about it, but I think this is good, and I know it's something that we always talk about internally a lot. So I appreciate you guys bringing this to the recording, and hopefully our listeners enjoy it as well. So thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
See ya.
Enjoy this podcast? Visit our website at summitcpa.net to get more tips and strategies for achieving modern CPA firm success. We're here to be a resource in this ever-changing industry.